What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now Back to the Past. I'm Alex, and in this video, I want to talk about Resident Evil 2 Remake. Let's celebrate the 5-year anniversary. Let's continue celebrating, actually, Halloween month. This game is phenomenal. Let me just start off by saying that, I got this game when it first came out, and, when we talk about retro, I don't know, 5 years necessarily is that, but I can still remember it, right? And that's kind of a part to it. So, Resident Evil 2 Remake is how you do it. There's been good remakes, and there were good remakes before it, but when it comes to this game in particular, it serves a couple different functions. Number one, it's just an incredible game. Number two, it continued to bring Resident Evil back. Now, at the time, Resident Evil was already experiencing kind of the turnaround story, right? The redemption arc had already begun, really, with 7. But we weren't there all the way, right? Because you can make like one good one and they can kind of go bad again. Now, for me, I actually really liked 5, but that was the turning point for a lot of people. So it was, 5, then 6, and it kind of snowballed from there. 7 was necessary and needed to turn the thing around. And then you go to this, and, even though RE3 Remake wasn't looked at as well, it still, I think, continued that turnaround. And they've never really looked back. Like, the series is back. So it serves as a good game. A remake type story, right? Because this is one of the best remakes that's ever been done. Even though it's 5 years old, it's still, games that are coming out now that are being remade should be looking back at Resident Evil 2 for guidance, right? And it also brought Resident Evil back, continued to bring Resident Evil back. Let me fix that, right? So special, very, very special. I remember really liking it when it first came out. Went back, replayed it, and we got a lot to talk about in this video. As always, you guys let me know what you think of the game in the comments below, and we'll take it from there, okay? So one thing I really want to emphasize is just almost like the fun factor. It felt like kind of going back to like an old friend, an old friendly game, and I actually never really put that much stock into Resident Evil 2 Remake. Like, firing it up, it's like, yeah, this just feels like home. It's got the familiar formula of Resident Evil, but it still looks beautiful. It's still, for not being a long game, because the game is only like 4 hours, a campaign for each of them. Now, there's benefit to playing, one, then the other. There's also benefit to actually do it again in reverse order. Multiple playthroughs kind of stack, and just kind of the benefits that you get from it. So, yeah, it can be a long game, but generally, if you're going to go through it even just once, right, you play even as both of them, you're going to go through in 3-4 hours, per character. So it's not too long. Again, it's kind of like returning home, but you're not staying all that much. You get that breath of air that you kind of, are familiar with, and then you kind of peace out. But, you could honestly fool me into believing this game came out this year. The cinematic kind of standards are very, very high, whether it's the cutscenes, which you get literally right away, or if it's the actual gameplay. And one thing I never really thought much about, I probably actually forgot this in those 5 years, is I don't know if you call them physics. I guess that's kind of what they are, right? Like, you look at what happens to a zombie when you shoot it or slice it or whatever, and it is insane. Like, that visual fidelity of the cutscenes and stuff. Not only does the world just look amazing when you're walking through it gameplay-wise, but, you can shoot legs off. You can shoot, like the chin, and like the face will start to fall. Like, it's actually insane. It's actually insane how, I guess, responsive everything is, where if you shoot a certain thing, it's going to react. And, it's like I want to focus on that more, but it's like it's hard to even describe it more than just what it is, right? Like, it just adds that extra feel to this game that honestly most games don't have. Like, it feels more responsive. It almost feels more real, even though just, much like every Resident Evil game, it can kind of get, ridiculous at times. But, speaking to that, the story, love it. And, the idea of playing through both of them, really, really cool. The fact that there are those kind of crossover moments, but also scenes that are kind of shared they're shared depending on if you pick one or the other. You quickly realize when you do the other one that they're the same thing, right? But sometimes they'll switch it up. And Mr. X, it really has all horror things kind of packaged in, right? Like, it's got the backtracking formula. It's got the riddles and puzzles and kind of organic puzzle solving that Resident Evil is known for, as well as other games, but it just does it so well. And again, it does it in a way where you kind of just like immediately jump into it, right? Where it's like, okay, you know, 1 or 2 paths are available. You go down those paths, you figure things out, you kind of backtrack, and you progressively open more and more things up. Now, you know, as the game goes on, eventually it gets a little bit more linear. You're kind of funneled in. There's boss type fights, right? There's cinematic story moments, and you peace out, you play as the other character, right? I think the acting in this game is also extremely good. I forgot how good, I mean, Ada Wong has always been, you know, I think a fan favorite, but she's extremely, extremely good in this game. Everybody, you know, seeing Claire, and, you know, Claire is kind of criminally underrated. I don't know about you guys, but hopefully she appears in RE9. Hopefully a lot of them come in RE9, but all of them, Leon, Claire, Ada, the whole cast, really, really good. The survival horror kind of aspect of it is also obviously alive and well, right? You're going through, again, you're kind of organically puzzle solving and opening things up and locking things up and all that stuff, and, you know, in those moments, you are scavenging. You're finding that extra pistol ammo. You're trying to figure out which enemies are able to kind of walk by, right? And it's just deep. It's a really deep game. I've even seen like people do kind of a like Mythbuster type episode years ago. People were doing like Mythbuster type episodes on this game where it's like you could walk right behind enemies they might not know. Some of them are attracted to sound a little differently than others. Like it's just, for being like a 4-hour game, it's actually rather deep and actually rather complex. And then in terms of the remake aspect, right, like there's a lot of ways to doing remakes wrong. And, you know, again, this wasn't the first remake out there, and it wasn't even the first, like, really good remake out there, but it put everything together, I think, at just an ideal moment, right? Where, like, Resident Evil needed something like this because, you know, you got RE7, but you adjust, I mean, even that's different. Like, 7's obviously very different than 2 Remake. 5 and 6 are very different than 2 Remake. So it kind of needed that familiar, like, going back to basics type feel, right? So just the overall kind of genre shift. And then also the remake part to it, right? Where they do modernize it, and they do make a lot of good changes. Well, you know, sometimes you make changes that aren't necessarily for the best, but they did, it's seemingly all of the right things. I'm not, like, a purist out there, but and maybe some of you could educate me more than others. But for me, like, RE2 Remake is probably the best way of playing RE2. Hopefully I don't get, you know, I think like RE3, you probably couldn't say that for. You'd probably get some argument if the original RE3 is better than the remake RE3. But I think 2, I feel like it satisfied everybody. I feel like it satisfied the OG fans. I think, again, it brings it up to modern audiences, but it does it in a way where it sets the tone or continues the tone of the, you know, original, the game that it's based off of, and it just brings everything up to, I guess at the time, 2019. Like, it just did all of the right things. As a remake, it continues to bring Resident Evil back, and then again, it's a blast. Like, it's a lot of fun to play it. It's scary. You know, the use of lighting in this game is extremely good. While Mr. X isn't there like a ton, he's there enough to scare the the living daylight out of you, and actually several enemies. Again, I mean, that's kind of the survival horror aspect of it. Like, you're kind of panicking, and you're going around. Sometimes you're like doubling back. I know for me personally, I was like, okay, well, I already had like a stacked inventory, and then I was good, and there was items. And I was like, well, I'm gonna kind of prioritize. I have some like some quest items, right? It's like I gotta keep those in because I'm going to do those things. Quickly did I run out of everything. I ran out of like literally everything, and there's still a lot of zombies around, and you know those windows are very easily breakable, so you gotta backtrack, and you gotta, I mean, you can use the map, and which I did actually quite often, but you get familiar with the environment, right? It's like, okay, well, if I take this turn, I can try to get into this room, and you kind of find like back alley things and all that, and you know, to go back to get that, you know, inventory that previously your inventory was full, now it's not, now it's severely lacking, now you have to pick those things up. So it's just a really fun game while also being a horror game. And like for me personally, you know, well, we've gone through horror month almost entirely. There's a couple more games left, but you know, horror games, I like them. They scare me. I don't love to be scared, but I'm willing to do it, you know, for horror games. But I really think this one strikes the right balance, right? Like Alien Isolation, which we covered, I think, last week, was one of those games where it's like, I'll do it. And I had fun with that game. I really, really liked that game. But, you know, there's times of just sitting there. There's times where it's like, I'm too scared to move, right? Resident Evil is almost actually the exact opposite, where it's like, number one, you have to keep moving. And number two, it just feels different, right? It's a little bit more action heavy, but without going over hoverboard. There's still the survival horror elements to it very much balances with the action gunplay type thing that it's got going on, right? Like, it strikes a really good balance at a lot of different things, and I feel like that's probably why it's one of the best Resident Evil games, one of the best remakes, you know, etc. So yeah, shorter video for you guys on this one. I just wanted to, you know, talk about this game a little bit. I really, really like it, and there's not too much more for me to say other than what's already been said. Like, this is an amazing game, sets the tone for, and it continues that comeback story for Resident Evil. Really, and I actually have it physically. That's another one. You know, a lot of 2018, 2019, 2020, a lot of those games I actually don't have physically for some reason. I guess I forgot. I didn't know for sure. It's like, well, do I have it physically? Maybe I got it digitally at the time. So it's good to have that physically. Not the cover art behind me, but still, this is a very cool picture. Cover art of the game also looking really, really good. So let me know what you guys think about the game in the comments. Make sure, as always, you're subscribed to the channel, bell icon turned on. I hope to see you all on the next one.